Hello and welcome to Esther's Gardening Adventures. I'm Esther, and today I'm going to show you what I do when I have more plants that I've grown using the winter sowing process, milk jugs, what I do when I have more plants that I could possibly put in my garden. In this area, we typically wait until after Mother's Day in Zone 7A to transplant our seedlings into the garden. Well, I had an unexpected trip that happened and I had to go out of the state for about a week. I'm going to be traveling a little bit more in the next day or so I need to get some things potted up. One of the challenges I have right now is my community garden bed that I have rented. If you've been tracking, I'm renting a 25 by 30 community garden plot. And one of the challenges with that is that the community garden plot, I need to prep the beds. And I was counting on having the last week to do that, and I just haven't been able to. So I need to pot up some of these plants, both to give them time to grow out their roots, and also because I need to start giving away seedlings, including to my own mother. But before I go any further, let me say, you can transplant any of your winter sown seedlings directly into the ground when they're ready to be transplanted or when you're ready to put them in the ground. You don't have to do what I'm about to do. This is a step you take if you're going to have more seedlings than you need for your own garden, and if you want to give some away, and or if it's just too early in the year for you, like if there's a frost coming up but the seedlings are outgrowing their containers, they really need to be transplanted up. Another benefit is for tomatoes especially, they can form, I'll get up close and show you, they can form roots along their stems. You see how there's this, get this out of the way here, all those little hairs along the stem? Well, all those little hairs are potential roots. And in fact, you can see here where the tomato is trying to form roots already along its base. So basically, you can transplant a tomato in the ground or in a container if you're potting it up as high as you want to along the stem. And I'll probably try to get it as high up as I can. That'll help provide the plant some support. You know, when they get really floppy and long like this, especially in winter sowing containers, they can get kind of weird shapes. Another thing is you can transplant them sort of sideways to have them stick right up in the ground if you want, or even in your cup if you can do it without breaking the stem. So this here is black crim tomatoes. If you're going to be potting up, if you're going to be transplanting these into containers before you put them in the ground, there's a few things you can have on hand. So you can use any kind of container that you can put a drainage hole in. I tend to get the large or small. You can do, for tomatoes, I try to do the larger ones because it gives them more space for the roots to grow. But you can basically take a solo cup or any kind of plastic cup. You can reuse yogurt containers. You can use potting, the potting containers you get other seedlings from. But basically you can use something like this, and then you just need to add holes to it in some way. And what I do is I like to cut a little hole in it, and I do it on both sides. See that? And I try to do it over something that'll catch it, because last year I had little red tabs all over my yard from not having a place to put them. So now you have 2 drainage holes. If it's a smaller cup, you can probably get away with 1 drainage hole. To label your things, you write the name of the plant here, or you can do like I'm gonna do here. I have a bunch of popsicle sticks left over from this season, so I'm gonna write them on here with a permanent marker. We're gonna be working with tomato cherry art colors from Baker Creek Seeds today. So the first thing you want to do is, if the soil if it didn't rain recently, or if it isn't really moist already to begin with, you want to water the container.
Adding water makes it easier to separate the seedlings for transplant. As for how to get the seedlings out of the containers,
you tip it over, and you wiggle it a little bit around the side. Sometimes you have to push in a little more. And I like to work in a surface, in a place where I can keep all the potting mix together, because you're gonna need more potting mix, but the more you can save to reuse for these seedlings or others, the better. The next thing I do is I just count how many seedlings I'm gonna have. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it looks like 8 out of the 9 seeds that I planted sprouted. I try to make sure there's a tiny bit of soil at the very bottom, just so the roots aren't directly against the plastic, but just the tiniest bit, because you want to get as much of that root of the stem of the tomato in there. And in this case, I'm just kind of seeing which ones are most willing to give. This one is sort of on the outside here, so I'm going to probably work these 2 first. Or maybe just this one. Now in this case, I'm gonna put it down as deep as it'll go. Now it looks like some of the roots came out, so I'm actually gonna take a little bit out. All right, I'm gonna put it down as deep as it'll go, and then I'm gonna remove the leaves to above. Try to keep the leaves for composting, because at this stage they're all healthy. Try to keep the leaves to above where the soil line is gonna be. And in this case, I'm gonna kind of bend it down a little bit, like that, to get as much of that in there as possible. Now you can just do it straight up like this, you can bend it down a little. I wanna get as much as possible in there. And I just go in, add the potting mix. I have a bag of potting mix on the ground here as well. Leftover ocean forest from when I did my winter sowing. But you can use any potting mix that you prefer. You definitely want to use potting mix and not something else though. Potting soil or potting mix. I'm gonna do a little bit more to give this guy a little more support, I think. One of the things I like to think about as I'm potting them up is which ones do I want to keep. If there's one where I get really amazing root system, I've saved just about all the roots on it, or the plant looks really amazing, I'll go ahead and put the marker that I pre-made in there. We're gonna get to the next one. Tiny bit of potting mix in the bottom. You want to try to get them separated as much as possible and just kind of jostle back and forth a little bit till the roots come out on their own. See, you have some roots at the bottom here. I'm gonna make sure you go all the way in. There we go. Take off those bottom rows of leaves. You're going to be removing them anyway in the garden before you transplant them probably. Now don't freak out too much if the plant isn't staying upright, if it doesn't look quite right. It will come back up towards the sun. When you winter sow, the plants do all kinds of acrobatics to try to get to the top of the jug to get the most sun, and they end up with really weird shapes, but it will be fine in the end. The plants will be happy and healthy, just like a plant that isn't all bent out of shape. Literally, but not in an upset way. If you haven't pre-moistened the soil, you want to make sure to pack it pretty high because it will condense once you put the water in. Now I'm not putting water in them yet until I'm done the whole thing, then I water them all at once. Okay, so this is another one that kind of came out by itself, so that's making my life easy. And this one's gonna look really nice sitting upright, so it's probably the ones I'll give away, because I don't actually care if the ones I keep to transplant are all bendy, you know, but the ones that people take, I want them to look nice. So they tend to get the ones that look a little more sort of standard, like you would get from your nursery or big box garden center. And I'm running out of places to put all my seedlings. But we'll water them now and I'll figure out where to put them later in terms of storage. All right, so there we have it. We have our 8 seedlings transplanted. And I'm going to show you an example of some seedlings that I transplanted that looked like this when I first did it and how they look today. This is old German tomatoes. These are seedlings I transplanted about a week ago. They were bent over, they were unhappy, they were all kinds of weird shapes. I still need to trim some of them because they were outside in 40-degree weather without me home to kind of put them in a warmer place, but and look how gorgeous that top is.
Okay, now let me show you what I do when I'm transplanting my seedlings first before I pot extras up.
Another option, if your garden is ready for plants to be transplanted, but you think you might have grown more than you expected, which is, you know, quite a common thing with winter sowing because it's such a success. One of the things you can do is you can actually transplant your seedlings into the bed first, the ones that you want, and then quickly pot up the ones that you're going to give away. So I have 4 different things here growing, and I know I want, the easiest one will probably be to get out one of the cardinal basil from this side. So I've never done this before from this method, but I'm going to try going in, since it's on an end piece, I'm going to try going in and lifting out some of it with its root. Ha! I succeeded! There we go, we got some of it with its root system. Put you here. So there you go, you can plant it up And then I can take this back to my workstation and I can pot these up, or I can save them a little longer. One trick though is make sure the roots don't dry out. So you can potentially put in a little potting mix around the edges to help keep them moist while you're transplanting them. And now I need to water these guys in. Water that I've saved from rain water, as well as water that was kind of sitting in a barrel all winter with some plants that were decaying. And I'm hoping it has some nutrition, like I've accidentally made a compost tea for these guys. As for what to do with your seedlings once you've potted them up, well, I like to give them some stability. So I like to use either kind of the trays you normally use or for growing seedlings indoors, or I go to Home Depot sometimes and they have these trays that they use to hold their seedlings that they toss out afterwards. And I like to pick up some of those because it provides real nice stability for solo cups. I mean, look how well that holds them in there. Now, one word of caution, you don't want to put them in a tray that stabilizes them, but then gathers water at the bottom. So we had some rain last night and I had these in here as a placeholder, and you can see there's water down there. Now I'm gonna empty it out and they're fine, but you don't want to come out and have them all drowning. You want to make sure whatever you put them in as a stabilizer has drainage holes. As for winter sown seedlings that you pot up before selling, before transplanting, or for whatever reason, you're going to treat them a little differently than you treat your containers that are still sealed up. First of all, they dry out a lot faster. So you're going to need to check them regularly to make sure they're well watered. The less soil you've used in a cup, the quicker it'll dry out. So like for example, my anise hyssop plant, I used very little potting mix and it's doing fine, but I need to make sure that it's well watered. Beyond watching water levels, you're also going to want to pay attention to the weather. While in a container, they can handle cooler temperatures down to 32 degrees, though you might want to cover them if it gets super cold. But once your plants that are not frost tolerant, the summer vegetables like peppers, tomatoes, eggplant, once you've potted them up, they cannot handle a frost. And if temperatures get below 40, you probably ought to put them in a warmer place or cover them up somehow. You can use frost cloths like you would use in your garden. I also tend to often put mine in the shed overnight if it's going to be below 40. And then I also have a cellar that isn't heated up near the top that I will put the seedlings in, and just make sure to take them out in the morning because they need sunlight, they need the air, they need the breeze, all of that stuff. All right, so I hope that gives you an idea of how I transplant and pot up seedlings. I hope you're having a great winter sowing season. I'm looking forward to giving you updates on my garden and all kinds of other things. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.